Whispers can destroy a reputation in a matter of seconds. But silence. Silence is far more dangerous. Exactly 365 days after he publicly crushed the only woman he ever loved, Nathaniel Harrington, Duke of Westmoreland, looked across a crowded ballroom and felt his own heart stop beating. Nathaniel Harrington was a man forged by duty, but unmade by love. As the 9th Duke of Westmoreland, his life had been meticulously charted from the moment he drew his first breath. He was destined to marry power, to breed heirs, and to maintain the icy, untouchable facade that his family had cultivated for centuries. Then came Isabella Montgomery. She was not a titled heiress. She was merely the daughter of Lord William Montgomery, a baron whose penchant for high-stakes card games at White's Club had driven his family to the very edge of ruin. Isabella, however, possessed a spirit that defied her family's crumbling estate. She was fiercely intelligent, blindingly radiant, and completely unimpressed by Nathaniel's formidable title. When they first met in the lush, manicured gardens of Lord Henry Cavendish's country estate, she had laughed at his stiff formality, completely disarming the most feared peer in England. For 6 intoxicating months, they engaged in a perilous secret courtship. Nathaniel, a man who had never known warmth, found himself utterly consumed by her. They stole moments in shadowed alcoves, passed clandestine letters through trusted maids, and dreamed of a future that defied the strict, unforgiving rules of high society. Nathaniel was prepared to risk the wrath of the ton. He had already commissioned a breathtaking diamond ring, planning to propose beneath the glass dome of the conservatory at the upcoming Danbury Ball. But society driven by jealousy and strict hierarchy does not forgive those who break its rules, and Dowager Duchess Catherine Nathaniel's ruthless mother was the very embodiment of society's iron will. Catherine had discovered the affair. Recognizing that Isabella was a threat to her son's impending political career and the family's wealth, the Dowager struck with calculated precision. She did not merely ask Isabella to leave, she orchestrated a masterpiece of blackmail. She acquired Lord Montgomery's sprawling, crippling debts. In a private, devastating meeting in the Westmoreland Library, Catherine presented Isabella with an impossible ultimatum: leave England forever, and sever all ties with Nathaniel, or watch her father be thrown into Fleet Prison, effectively destroying her entire family's lives. To ensure the wound would fester and never heal, Catherine demanded Isabella write a letter, dictated by the Dowager herself, confessing that she had only ever courted the Duke to pay off her father's gambling debts, and that her affections lay elsewhere. Isabella, trapped and weeping silently, signed her own emotional death warrant. However, the true cruelty of the Dowager's plan was the timing. She ensured the letter was delivered to Nathaniel on the very night of the Danbury Ball, mere hours before he was to propose. When Nathaniel read the words in Isabella's unmistakable handwriting, something inside the Duke permanently fractured. The betrayal was absolute. The love that had warmed him instantly curdled into a toxic, blinding rage. He believed he had been played for a fool by a desperate, manipulative fortune hunter. That evening the Danbury ballroom was ablaze with 1,000 wax candles, the air thick with perfume string music and aristocratic gossip. Isabella, unaware that the letter had already been delivered earlier than agreed, attended the ball. She wore a simple, pale blue silk gown, her eyes frantically searching the crowd for Nathaniel, preparing to shatter his heart with a staged rejection to save her father. She never got the chance. Nathaniel approached her in the center of the dance floor. The musicians were just tuning their instruments for a waltz. The crowd naturally parted for the Duke, sensing the dark, tempestuous aura rolling off him. "Your Grace," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling as she looked up into eyes that were no longer the warm amber she loved, but chips of frozen ice. "Miss Montgomery?" Nathaniel's voice carried sharp and lethal. The nearby guests paused their fans, freezing mid-flutter. "I received your correspondence. A remarkable piece of fiction. I must applaud your dedication to the theatrical arts." Isabella's breath hitched. "Nathaniel, please. Do not presume to use my Christian name." He snapped the volume of his voice, drawing the attention of half the ballroom. "I suppose I should be grateful. You have spared me the profound humiliation of attaching my family's ancient name to a common swindler." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The music stopped abruptly. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, but the chains of her blackmail held her tongue. She could not defend herself. She could only stand there, absorbing the brutal public lashing from the man she loved. "Return to your father, Miss Montgomery." Nathaniel continued his voice, echoing in the sudden, dreadful silence of the room. "And tell him that the Duke of Westmoreland's coffers are officially closed to parasites. You are nothing to me. You never were." He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Isabella standing completely alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the vicious, mocking whispers of London's elite. By sunrise, the Montgomery family had vanished from London. Whispers claimed they had fled to the continent in disgrace. Nathaniel buried his grief beneath layers of ice and cruelty, returning to the rigid expectations of his title. He courted Lady Arabella Fitzwilliam, a suitable, emotionless match approved by his mother, and locked away the memory of Isabella Montgomery forever. Or so he thought. 1 year later, Mayfair was in the suffocating grip of the high season. Nathaniel stood near the towering marble pillars of the Cavendish estate, a crystal glass of untouched amber liquid in his hand. The Cavendish Masquerade was the premier event of the year, a sprawling spectacle of silk dominoes, feathered masks, and veiled indiscretions. Yet Nathaniel felt nothing but profound, hollow boredom. He was a man operating purely on muscle memory. His impending marriage to Lady Arabella, who was currently gossiping behind a silver mask near the punch bowl, was a transaction. Love was a foolish indulgence he had permanently discarded on the floor of the Danbury ballroom. He had become known as the Iron Duke, terrifying in Parliament, ruthless in business, and entirely void of warmth. "You look entirely miserable, Westmoreland," remarked Lord Henry Cavendish, adjusting his velvet half-mask as he joined Nathaniel by the pillar. "It is a masquerade. You are supposed to be indulging in scandal, not glaring at my guests as if you wish to tax them." "Your guests are tedious, Henry," Nathaniel replied smoothly, his tone flat. "The same faces, hiding behind the same feathers, playing the same exhausting games." "Ah, but there is a new face tonight," Henry murmured, his eyes drifting toward the grand double doors at the top of the sweeping marble staircase. "Or rather, a highly anticipated arrival. Have you not heard the rumors the Earl of Weston has returned from France, and he has brought a ward with him, an heiress of unimaginable wealth. They say she inherited the entire estate of the late Marquis de la Roche. She's the talk of St. James's." Nathaniel sneered. Another wealthy debutante desperate to purchase an English title. How groundbreaking. Before Henry could reply, the heavy brass knocks of the majordomo's staff echoed through the cavernous room. The music, a lively quadrille, began to fade as the guests intuitively sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "Lord Frederick Weston, Earl of Weston," the majordomo bellowed, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "And Miss Isabella Montgomery." The name dropped like a guillotine blade. The Duke of Westmoreland's hand tightened around his crystal glass so violently that it shattered, driving sharp shards into his palm. He did not feel the pain. He did not feel the blood dripping onto the polished floors. He could only stare. The heavy mahogany doors swung open. The whispers that had instantly erupted at the announcement died in the throats of the ton. The woman standing at the top of the stairs was not the broken, humiliated girl who had fled London in disgrace a year ago. She was a vision of absolute commanding power. Isabella wore a gown of deep midnight blue velvet that clung to her curves, embroidered with real diamonds that caught the candlelight like stars. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant, intricate style, interwoven with sapphires. A delicate silver mask covered the upper half of her face, but there was no mistaking the proud, defiant tilt of her chin or the striking, devastating beauty of her features. She did not look like a woman ruined by scandal. She looked like a queen returning to conquer a rebellious province. Beside her stood Lord Frederick Weston, a man 10 years Nathaniel's senior, ruggedly handsome, and famously dangerous. Frederick placed a protective, intimate hand over Isabella's gloved fingers, where they rested on his arm. She turned and offered him a smile, a genuine, dazzling smile that physically knocked the breath from Nathaniel's lungs. She descended the sweeping staircase, completely unhurried. The crowd parted for her, not out of mockery, as they had a year prior, but out of sheer, unadulterated awe. The whispers that usually accompanied a scandal were completely absent. Every whisper fell silent. The sheer audacity of her return, coupled with the staggering display of newfound wealth and the protection of a powerful earl, left the aristocratic sharks entirely speechless. They did not know whether to bow or to shun her, and so they did nothing but stare. Nathaniel was paralyzed. His chest heaved as a torrential flood of buried emotions, rage, longing, regret, and a burning, possessive jealousy violently broke through his icy facade. She was here. She was incredibly, painfully beautiful, and she belonged to someone else. Isabella and Frederick reached the bottom of the stairs and began to move through the crowd. Guests practically tripped over themselves to step aside. Isabella's gaze swept over the room, cool and detached, until inevitably her eyes met Nathaniel's. Time fractured. Across 30 feet of silk feathers and astonished aristocrats, their gazes locked. Nathaniel expected to see shame. He expected to see fear, or perhaps the lingering sorrow of a broken heart. He saw absolutely nothing. Isabella looked at the Duke of Westmoreland as if he were a complete stranger. There was no flicker of recognition, no flinch, no hesitation. Her eyes behind the silver mask were as calm and indifferent as a still pond. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, just long enough to let him know she saw him, before smoothly turning her attention back to Lord Weston, laughing softly at something the Earl whispered in her ear. It was the most violent strike she could have possibly delivered. Worse than a slap, worse than a scream. It was complete, devastating erasure. "Good God," Lord Henry whispered beside Nathaniel, completely oblivious to his friend's bleeding hand. "She has completely reinvented herself. She looks untouchable." Nathaniel did not answer. He couldn't. He watched Isabella glide toward the dance floor, her midnight blue skirts sweeping across the marble. The music cautiously started up again, a sweeping waltz. Lord Weston took Isabella into his arms, spinning her into the center of the room. The pain in Nathaniel's hand was nothing compared to the violent tearing in his chest. The narrative he had clung to for a year, that she was a desperate, deceitful commoner who had ruined him, was disintegrating before his eyes. A fortune hunter did not return as an heiress. A fraud did not look at the man she supposedly used with such absolute, chilling indifference. Something was wrong. Something had been terribly, fatally wrong for a year. As Nathaniel stood bleeding in the shadows, watching the only woman he ever loved dance in the arms of another man, a single terrifying thought crystallized in his mind. He was going to find out the truth, even if he had to tear the entirety of London high society apart to do it. Blood dripped from Nathaniel Harrington's clenched fist, staining the immaculate white cuff of his shirt. Yet the physical agony was entirely eclipsed by the torment ravaging his mind. He watched Isabella Montgomery spin gracefully across the Cavendish ballroom floor, her sapphire-studded hair catching the golden light of 1,000 chandeliers. For 365 days, he had convinced himself she was a ghost of his own foolishness. Now she was a living, breathing empress of London society, wrapped in the arms of Lord Frederick Weston. Nathaniel could not breathe. He pushed away from the marble pillar, ignoring Lord Henry Cavendish's alarmed protests. The Duke of Westmoreland moved through the crowd with the predatory focus of a hunting panther. Aristocrats instinctively parted their fans, fluttering nervously as they sensed the violent storm brewing behind his amber eyes. He reached the edge of the dance floor just as the waltz transitioned into its final sweeping crescendo. Without a shred of gentlemanly decorum, Nathaniel stepped directly into the path of the dancing couple. "Lord Weston." Nathaniel said, his voice a low, lethal rumble that carried over the music. "I believe this dance is concluded. I require a moment with your ward." Frederick Weston halted his grip on Isabella's waist, tightening protectively. The Earl of Weston was not a man easily intimidated. He met Nathaniel's furious gaze with a smirk of absolute aristocratic disdain. "Westmoreland, I was unaware you possessed the manners of a dock worker. Miss Montgomery's dance card is entirely full, and I highly doubt she wishes to converse with a man whose reputation for cruelty precedes him." Nathaniel stepped closer. His jaw locked. "This does not concern you, Weston. Everything regarding Isabella concerns me," Frederick replied smoothly. "It is quite all right, Frederick." Isabella's voice sliced through the tension like a silver blade. She placed a gently reassuring hand on the Earl's chest, though her eyes remained fixed on Nathaniel. Her gaze was chillingly blank. "His Grace is merely curious. Curiosity is the crutch of the uninformed. Give us a moment." Frederick hesitated, then stepped back, offering a crisp bow. "I shall be at the terrace doors, my dear. Should you require him removed, you need only nod." As Weston retreated, Nathaniel and Isabella were left standing in the center of the room. The music had started a new sequence, but they remained completely still, an island of furious tension amidst a sea of swirling silk. "You have reinvented yourself, Miss Montgomery." Nathaniel breathed his eyes, searching her face for any trace of the girl who used to laugh in the Cavendish gardens. "Or should I address you by whatever fraudulent title you have purchased?" Isabella did not flinch. "You may address me as Miss Montgomery, Your Grace, though I prefer you do not address me at all. I am merely indulging your temper tantrum, so you do not make a further spectacle of yourself. You are bleeding on the marble. It is terribly undignified." Nathaniel looked down at his ruined hand, then back up to her. "How did you do this? A year ago your father was drowning in gambling debts. Now you arrive draped in the wealth of a French marquis, clinging to the arm of an earl. Tell me, Isabella, whose bed did you have to warm to orchestrate this miraculous resurrection?" The insult was designed to draw blood to crack her icy exterior. Instead, Isabella smiled a slow, terrifying curve of her lips that made Nathaniel's blood run cold. "You always were remarkably blind, Nathaniel," she whispered, her voice, dropping to a register, meant only for him. "You see the world exactly as your mother paints it. It never once occurred to you to look beneath the canvas. Enjoy your impending nuptials to Lady Arabella. I hear she is exactly the sort of obedient lapdog the Westmoreland estate requires." She turned to walk away. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seized Nathaniel's chest. He reached out his bloody hand, catching her wrist. The moment his skin touched hers, a violent jolt of electricity sparked between them, a desperate echo of their buried past. Isabella froze. She looked down at his hand, then up into his frantic amber eyes. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Nathaniel saw it, the flash of profound, agonizing heartbreak she had carried for a year. "Do not touch me," she commanded, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "You lost that privilege the night you humiliated me before the entire ton." She wrenched her arm free and glided away, disappearing into the glittering throng of masquerade guests. Nathaniel stood paralyzed, staring at the blood on his fingers. "You see the world exactly as your mother paints it." The words echoed in his skull like a tolling bell. By the time the sun crept over the London skyline the following morning, Nathaniel was not in his bed. He was seated in the shadowy, smoke-filled office of Elias Finchley, the most ruthless and discreet private investigator in all of England. "I want every financial record of Lord William Montgomery from the past 3 years," Nathaniel ordered, tossing a heavy pouch of gold sovereigns onto Finchley's desk. "I want to know who purchased his debts, where they were transferred, and the exact circumstances of his departure from London a year ago." Finchley, a gaunt man with calculating eyes, counted the coins. "It will take 48 hours, Your Grace." "You have 24, Nathaniel snarled, slamming his fist onto the desk, "or I will burn this office to the ground." Exactly 22 hours later, Nathaniel Harrington kicked open the heavy mahogany doors of his mother's private drawing room in Westmoreland House. The Dowager Duchess. Catherine sat calmly by the fireplace, sipping Earl Grey tea, the very picture of aristocratic serenity. She looked up, annoyed by the intrusion. "Nathaniel, really? Your manners are deteriorating. What is the meaning of this?" Nathaniel threw a thick stack of vellum documents onto the low table between them. They scattered, revealing ledgers, bank transfers, and copies of promissory notes. "You bought them," Nathaniel said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "You bought every single one of Lord Montgomery's debts." Catherine barely glanced at the papers. The man was a degenerate gambler. His debts were easily acquired. It was a simple business transaction, ensuring the Westmoreland estate's investments were diversified. "Do not lie to me," Nathaniel roared, the sound vibrating the crystal drops of the chandelier. "You blackmailed her. You threatened to throw her father into Fleet Prison unless she wrote that letter. The letter you dictated. You orchestrated the entire destruction of the woman I loved, and you handed me the blade to finish the job." Catherine stood, her expression hardening into a mask of iron. "I saved you. She was a penniless nobody. She would have tainted our bloodline, ruined your political standing, and dragged our name into the gutters of society. I did what was necessary to protect the Harrington legacy. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you," Nathaniel whispered, his chest heaving as the horrific magnitude of his mistake crashed down upon him. He had looked into Isabella's eyes, eyes filled with desperate, silent pleas for help, and he had slaughtered her in front of hundreds of people. He had been his mother's weapon. "You are a monster," Nathaniel said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "And you have vastly underestimated me. As of this moment, you are stripped of all allowances. Your access to the Westmoreland coffers is permanently severed. You will pack your belongings, and you will relocate to the desolate coastal manor in Cornwall. If you ever set foot in London again, I will personally ensure your social ruin is so spectacular it will be recorded in history books." Catherine gasped, her composure finally shattering. "You cannot do this. I am the Dowager Duchess. I am your mother. You are nothing to me." Nathaniel echoed the exact words he had brutally spoken to Isabella a year ago. He turned his back on her and walked out, his mind entirely consumed by one singular, desperate mission. Grosvenor Square was bathed in the soft, golden light of the late afternoon sun when Nathaniel's black carriage pulled up to the grand townhouse leased by the Earl of Weston. Nathaniel did not bother with calling cards or proper societal protocols. He bypassed the astonished footman, practically tearing the front doors off their hinges as he strode into the marble foyer. "Where is she?" Nathaniel demanded of the bewildered butler. Before the servant could answer, a voice drifted from the top of the grand staircase. "There is no need to terrorize the staff, Your Grace." Isabella stood on the landing, wearing a simple day dress of ivory muslin. Without the diamonds and the masquerade mask, she looked achingly familiar, yet the cold authority in her posture remained. Nathaniel climbed the stairs, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. When he reached the landing, he did not hesitate. The Iron Duke, the most feared man in Parliament, the untouchable aristocrat, fell to his knees on the carpet. Isabella took a sharp step back, her breath hitching. "What are you doing?" "I know." Nathaniel choked out his voice, cracking under the weight of his immense guilt. He looked up at her tears finally spilling over his dark lashes, tracking down his stoic face. "I know everything, Isabella. I know about the debts. I know about the blackmail. I know about the letter." Isabella stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. For a long moment, the silence between them was deafening, heavy with the ghosts of their shattered past. "You know," she whispered, her voice trembling, "a year too late." "I was a fool," Nathaniel pleaded, reaching out to grasp the hem of her dress. "I was a blind, arrogant fool. I allowed my pride to blind me to the truth of your heart. I let my mother turn me into a weapon against the only light I have ever known. I broke you, Isabella, and I will spend the rest of my miserable life trying to mend the pieces. I have banished my mother to Cornwall. I have officially broken my engagement to Lady Arabella. I have nothing left but the devastating realization that I destroyed my own soul the night I pushed you away." Isabella looked down at the powerful man weeping at her feet. The anger that had fueled her for a year, the bitter armor she had forged in France, began to fracture. "Do you know why Lord Weston helped me?" Isabella asked softly. 10 years ago, your mother destroyed Frederick's younger sister in a similar fashion, driving her into exile. When Frederick found my father and me destitute in Paris, he recognized your mother's handiwork. The Marquis de la Roche was a distant cousin of Frederick's. When he passed, Frederick arranged for the inheritance to be transferred to me, forging me into an heiress. She knelt on the floor across from him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I did not return to London to marry Frederick. Our relationship is purely an alliance of vengeance. I returned to show you that I survived. I returned to look you in the eye and prove that you didn't destroy me." "But I did," Nathaniel whispered, reaching up to gently cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a rogue tear that escaped her eye. "I broke your heart." "Yes," Isabella admitted, leaning into his touch, the warmth of his skin melting the last of her frozen defenses. "You did, but it healed. It healed stronger. I am no longer the helpless baron's daughter who can be crushed by the dowager duchess. I am an equal, and I require an equal." Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of jasmine and rain that he had dreamed of for a year. "I am yours, completely and utterly yours. I will burn down the world to keep you safe. Marry me, Isabella. Not as a secret, not in the shadows. Stand beside me as the Duchess of Westmoreland, and let them all see that you own me." Isabella pulled back just enough to look deeply into his amber eyes, searching for any trace of the icy stranger from the ballroom. She found only the fiercely passionate man she had fallen in love with in the Cavendish Gardens. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. "On one condition, Nathaniel." "Anything," he breathed. "We host the wedding at the Danbury ballroom," she said, her eyes flashing with triumphant fire. "Right in the center of the dance floor. Nathaniel let out a breathless, wet laugh, crashing his lips against hers. The kiss was a collision of desperate relief and burning passion, sealing a promise that no society, no scandal, and no mother could ever break again. 6 months later, the doors of the Danbury ballroom swung open. The ton, suffocating on their own curiosity, watched in absolute silence as Nathaniel Harrington, the Duke of Westmoreland, led his radiant bride to the center of the floor. Isabella wore a gown of pure white silk, dripping in diamonds that rivaled the chandeliers. As they began their waltz, the aristocrats watched the most powerful couple in England spin flawlessly in each other's arms. They searched for a flaw, for a reason to gossip, for a crack in the armor. But there was none, and for the rest of their long, fiercely devoted lives together, whenever the Duke and Duchess of Westmoreland entered a room, every single whisper fell completely, permanently silent. If you loved this story of vengeance, heartbreak, and ultimate redemption, do not forget to hit the like button. Your support helps bring more dramatic historical romances to life. Share this video with fellow romance lovers who appreciate a brilliant twist and a powerful groveling duke. Make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another epic love story on our channel. See you next time.